Good evening and welcome to the Legion Cantina. In today's episode, we'll be going through the final groups from the Legion Cantina Cup that we've been doing over the last few months. So first and foremost, let's talk about the results from the previous groups. So from Group E, it would be we had Yoda versus Anakin, Yoda over Anakin progressing at 34%. Tempest did really well, but Yoda over Anakin progressed to the quarterfinals. And then in Group F, we had Imperial March, which won actually, I think, the most convincing margin we've had so far at 42% of the vote. So that will be the third quarterfinal. And yeah, we've just got the two that will progress from today's video, and then we'll have all our quarterfinals sorted in the next video. So let's get into Group G. So first one we're looking at is the Mando assisted rebels. So this is going to be at 10 activations, and kind of the theme of this list is essentially everything is very tough apart from the 3 rebel troopers, seems to be the vibe. So got Luke with reflexes, inspiring presence, situational and prepared. Personally, I don't think reflexes is necessary here. You've got really good dodge access, firstly from Luke's command cards. I think 2 of them give him dodge's base anyway, and then you also have prepared supplies, so I don't think reflexes is the take here, especially as you don't have any sort of natural recover, so you would have to recover in order to get reflexes back. Personally, I'd be going for burst of speed in this slot. Inspiring presence is fine. A big courage 3 bubble is no bad thing at all, and I mean, it's interesting because how valuable that Courage 3 is kind of up for debate in this one a bit, because your Rebel Troopers, you don't really care that much about if they're going to get shot, like they're quite expendable here. And then all the Mando resistance will be Courage 2, so yes, that Courage 3 is nice, but maybe an Improv or a Trusted, I think, would go a bit further in this list. Situational's fine. I personally would be taking. You could argue into the fray. I mean, do you even need a training slot? I don't really know. Like, I think you can generally leave the training slot on Commander Luke blank, so maybe just 4 points that you could spend better elsewhere here. Then prepared supplies is, I think, a really good take. It would be my sort of, not an auto take on Commander Luke, but I think getting that block, especially when you're in melee with kind of a big force user, which is where Luke's hoping to be, could be really nice. Then moving over to Leia, Improv, Vigilance, Seize, Portable. I think these are fine. Improv, I've spoken about loads, is always fine. Your dodge access is really strong here, and keeping a dodge on Ahsoka or a dodge on Leia and things like that can be really powerful. You're not using the sort of dodge aspect, keeping it on the core in this list very often, unless you're kind of pushing Leia and the pod of Rebel Troopers off to one side maybe. But yeah, Vigilance isn't terrible. I think maybe just a bit expensive in its current form. Seize, because I guess your order control is going to be pretty knackered here, so maybe it's all right. Situational is also a valid take on Leia, just for she will have lots of dodges, so dodging those crits. And then portable scanner for that take cover 3 is never bad. Ahsoka with force push, I don't agree with this personally. I think it's just too expensive, and bearing in mind you can't then take burst of speed, I think this is not the right take. So it may be, but this then pushes Ahsoka to be very close to 200 points. What's that going to be? Over 170 points. It's too expensive. So yeah, I'd just save the points, take burst of speed, give it that greater threat range. Force reflexes is fine. I never get the offensive defensive on Ahsoka, because I just don't know when you would have time. I guess if you're in melee and you dodge punch, maybe, but personally I'd rather just recover and then tap reflexes and get, in my case, offensive pushback. So yeah, I would be taking offensive push or into the fray over offensive defensive here. Strike team leader is fine to hit one of the Mandos. I'm actually running this myself in a couple of lists at the moment, and actually seems to work pretty well. So yeah, agree with strike team lead. Sabine with up close, the combat shield prepared, and Darksaber. This is how I would run Sabine if I was taking all of her kit. Personally, myself, I leave the combat shield at home, but pretty much everything else I would be bringing, so no issues here. 3 Rebel Troopers, can't go wrong, and then Mando Resistance, Situational Transponder, the shields and jetpacks. I think the combat shields are overkill, personally. The only situation in which I think the combat shields are worth it is if there's a lot of ranged pierce around, and there doesn't seem to be that much ranged pierce around in the metas I'm in, at least, so maybe not worth it, but it's a meta call, and if you want to take it, it's fine. Like, being able to automatically block 2 hits is always really solid. And then the Mando resistances are kitted out very similarly, just one of them gets offensive push. I think, again, this is overkill. Like, The problem is, I was about to say you could put some slingers in, or you could just drop some extra core in or something, but I think just 3 lots of the combat shields does feel like overkill, and those points could be spent better elsewhere. And if you were to, for instance, swap out Force Push and drop all the combat shields, that gets you 60 points, and you could definitely find a few more points to get, a swoop in or something and pushing you to that 11 act, because 10 is very low for Rebels, even though it's all very tough. And I think there is something interesting in this list just because of how tough almost all the stuff that's going to be actually, in the line of fire is going to be. Like, you're going to leave your Rebel troopers somewhere on a back objective, somewhere just to, if you're playing Recover the Research, for instance, they'll be on your home objective. Then everything else is actually going to be mostly red surging saves, which is actually pretty nice. So I think there is something in this style of list. Just, I think 10 acts is too few when you don't actually have that much damage output either. So it's an interesting idea, but yeah, I think just could be a few efficiencies made to maybe make it that bit stronger. Suppression, a 12-act Empire list with Vader and Krennic. Callus in here as well. Lots of storms, double deaths, no sort of heavy, just the sort of cheaper DTF-16 that gives Compel, and then 3 Dumacs with Tenacity and Comms Jammer. I mean, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on here. I don't necessarily agree with Force Barrier on Vader. I'd be taking Choke. I think there's just too much value in getting Vader free with that Choke. But yeah, Improv and Binox on Krennic is fine, and the rest of Vader's kit's all good, so no issues there. Improv and Strike Team Lead, I think, is fine with Callus. How much he's going to be in range of those deaths, I'm not really sure, but if he gives them a couple of aims, it's no bad thing, so yeah, can't be too mad. Quad Riots, I think Riots are fine now. Yeah, just Snows are still better. And I mean, this list is going to be moving up very aggressively with the exception of the deaths. I did wonder, actually, the deaths just for their red surging saves, but yeah, I think it's too many points to pay for a unit that just seems like, in this case, to have a bit of a confused identity. I think at least if you take the heavy, the red, white gun, it just makes a bit more sense. And yes, it comes in at nearly 100 points, but then at least you kind of know what you're doing with that unit. Whereas this one, I guess maybe it pushes up with Callus, but yeah, I don't know how good that feels. And then yeah, triple Dewbacks. The lack of weapons here is a bit concerning. I think taking the RT-97 or whatever it's called, the red 3 white gun, over Comms Jammer personally, and then I don't know if you need Tenacity. I think the thing is, it's very easy to imagine the best case scenario for Tenacity, but a lot of the time, it increasingly feels like in this game, units are either kind of alive or dead. There doesn't seem to be that kind of intermediary point there used to be where units were kind of wounded for an extended period of time. And yes, if this is wounded and it gives you an extra red dice, maybe that's worth it. But if that doesn't go off every time, I then don't think it is worth it. And I would rather spend 5 points on getting 1 or maybe 2 long range shots off with the rifle, as opposed to taking Tenacity for more points. So yeah, that's just my take on Tenacity versus the RT-97. But yeah, I like this list. I think it's got a lot, it's got a lot of riots going on, and it does have a lot of close range, which is, I think this is an unusual way of building an Empire list, because it doesn't really have much of a gunline element. The closest is the deaths, and even they're not really kitted out to be that gunline. In terms of how competitive it is, I think it's on the lower end, but if you've got Vader with burst and saber throw, you've always got a reasonable shot. I think there are some maybe better options, ways this list could be optimized, but it's not terrible. And theme, I think it's 5 out of 10. It doesn't seem to do anything particularly special, particularly badly for theme. I think it's just fairly middle of the road. Moving over to Bad Rexikin, as I've christened this one. Anakin, Rex, Bad Batch, 3 clones, 2 arcs with Jedi Guardian, and then 1 with Ahsoka. So this is kind of a middle ground between that sort of 6-act, Anakin, Rex, Bad Batch, triple big clone infantry, and then the sort of more spammy Gar list that you tend to see. This is kind of sitting in the middle, and in terms of the way each of them are equipped, I think it's okay. This is personally pretty much how I would equip Anakin. There's an argument for maybe seize the initiative, but most of the time he can get an order, and Yeah, I think burst is correct, saber throw is correct. He doesn't really need force push as much just because he does so much damage, so not quite as necessary. Rex improv recon, and I've given environmental gear because there were 2 points spare, and I don't like lists that come in under 1,000. I think this is reasonably solid, and Bad Batch and Anakin both getting Scout 2 is really reasonable. Yeah, then obviously Batch, we've spoken about them before. 3 lots of clone infantry with a Z6. I would put a couple of shotguns in. I think 1 or 2 Z6s is okay, but a couple of shotguns for the same points. It hits harder, it does more damage. I think it's better. So yeah, that would just be a little change I'd make here. Arcs with the Guardian into the fray. Personally, I'd drop the Guardian for a medic. The unit already has charge and the ability to heal. You have so many good medic targets, like Anakin and Bad Batch are obviously the primary targets. Lesser options are, of course, the Arcs themselves and Rex, and then worst comes to worst, you bring Wrecker Clone Infantry. All of those are perfectly valid. But yeah, I approve of Into the Fray. There's a debate there between Into the Fray and Targeting Scopes. Targeting Scopes, if you want to go big, obviously Into the Fray, they love surges. They don't surge either way, so that could be super valuable as well. But yeah, I think it's not super original. It's kind of in the middle. I think competitive wise, yeah, 6 or a 7. Like, this is fairly solid. And the theme is just, fairly standard GAR list. Nothing particularly special. But yeah, I think if you saw this list across the table, it would be a bit of a handful to deal with. So maybe I'm going to give it a 7 on the competitive end. Finally, 6 sabers. Grievous with just tenacity. I think you pretty much always getting block is just too useful, and it leaves you so vulnerable if you are caught out in a ranged attack, and it makes you so survivable if you're able to pull it off in melee. So that is a change I would make. I'd find 5 points to put in prepared supplies, and also an improv if you can find it. Maul with barrier reflexes, strike team lead, and tenacity. Yeah, I mean, barriers, okay. The idea of this list, they explain in the comment, is that this Maul kind of goes up with the BXs and kind of keeps them safe and gives them aims, which I don't hate. Like, the BXs do enjoy an aim because they're going to be attacking quite a lot with their Scout 3 and their charge with the Vibro Swords. So, yeah, there's something there. I don't know. A saber throw on Maul is always decent just because you do have so many actions with Maul, and obviously tenacity is pretty much not an auto take, I was about to say, but it is a very sensible take in his ability to wound himself. Super battle droids with the ACM, 1 super battle droid with nothing, and 4 lots of B1s. 6 lots of core never hurt. I think Separatist core is really solid, and you've got the B2s for a little bit of damage, and then the B1s to kind of clog up your activation, slow things down, and mean your more powerful units can come on that bit later. The Sith probe droid is fine, good supportive element for Maul. That observe is nice. It's a shame it's a full action, but it's not bad at all. And incognito and things like that, it can be a bit of a tricky objective player. Droidicas, yeah, even post nerf, they're still absolutely fine. They're less good than they were, but still really decent. And then the battle tank with all the correct stuff on it, link targeting, droid pilot, armor piercing, high energy, all of these I think are absolutely fine. So yeah, a lot of really sensible decisions here. I think the only really big miss for me is no prepared supplies on Grievous, but you are fairly tight for points, so I can see why that might be excluded. In terms of originality, not really seen a list like this before. I've seen kind of the double AAT Grievous thing be done before, but this is maybe a bit of a different take on it, and nice to see them all in a list, so I'll give it a 7 out of 10 for originality. Competitiveness, I'm actually going to bump it up. I was originally going to have it at 5, but I'm going to put it at least a 6, and there's an argument that it may be actually slightly higher. I think your order control will be a bit tricky with the BXs, and Grievous and Maul are both quite order hungry, as well as the tank, so there isn't, it's maybe a little bit tricky there, but I'm sure you could find a way to hopefully get the orders onto the AAT. Then theme-wise, I think it's reasonable, 6 out of 10, doesn't do anything super special, but also nothing too bad. Moving over to Group H, this is the KV Army, and would you look at that, it's another Krennic Vader list. I really should have been keeping more of a track on how many of each faction we have, but I think there is a very high representation of Empire in this cup, which, I don't know, kind of makes sense. It's nice to see that despite it being the worst faction, people are still sticking with it. But Krennic with improv and targeting scopes. Targeting scopes I do not understand. I'm kind of hoping it's a misclick because that doesn't make any sense to me. Vader kit's perfect. Can't see any issues here. This is what I'd take with Vader. 200 points and feels really powerful. Shores with the extra trooper and the T21B. If you're taking Shores, probably worth taking the heavy, and the extra trooper is fine. Maybe there'd be more efficient to spend points elsewhere, but yeah, feels alright. The DLT on the Storms for some anti-armor, nothing wrong with that. Personally, I prefer the RT, whatever it is, the red 3 white gun, but yeah, I think both are fine. Storms with the KXs and March, I think this is really solid, and you know, if you had Imperial March on some snows rather than the Shores, for instance, maybe that would feel a bit better, but Shores also do have value, so not objectively wrong, just personally I prefer the kind of extra mobility that you maybe get with the Snowtroopers versus the Shores. Deaths with DLT and Overwatch, you will be generating decent standbys. Yeah, there's Krennic's 2-pip, and there's nothing stopping you from going on standby as well with the deaths and having that range 3, along with the aim you get from the, I think it's ready one, I think is the keyword you get standbys with, so that's absolutely fine. Scouts are going really aggro, the frag grenades, the sonic charge, and the hacked comms. You know, it's a pretty big dice pool, and getting surge to crit isn't bad. I don't mind this more aggro scout trooper build. I just wish it loses value in this particular comp because the deaths would be getting an order from Krennic anyway. So having the scouts there just doesn't feel as valuable. I can understand because you've already filled out your support kind of area, so maybe that's why it's been included. But personally, I'd probably just have looked to include another set of deaths because with kit, this is coming in at a bit tricky, isn't it? 81 points. Maybe you could have found some points elsewhere, dropped a heavy on the Storms, for instance, and gone to another set of deaths. But yeah, nothing to stop you putting in more aggro scouts, and the sonic charge isn't bad. It's a reasonable dice pool, I guess. Yeah, not the worst. Speeder bikes, strike and fade, this is absolutely fine. I think strike and fade, if you have the points for it, is really it's a nice thing to have. I think it's not an auto take on any of them apart from the swoops, and actually probably the stabs now I think about it, but not as necessary on the speeder bikes because they don't have an ability that procs off movement. Dewbacks with the RT97, this is how I would take my Dewbacks, just 75 points. Armor 1, red saves, can do some damage from pretty much any range, handle themselves up close, feels really good. And then range troopers, I would I would not bring range troopers, I would just bring another Dewback personally. I think you pay too much for cost for range troopers' ability, but they're not the worst, but you know, just relentless armor 1 and red saves on the Dewbacks feels really good, so that would personally be my take. But yeah, don't hate this. I think it's a fairly standard Imperial army. I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10 for originality. On the competitive angle, the only real oversight I think is Krennic with targeting scopes. I don't really understand that. The rest of it's perfectly solid. I do enjoy some double riots. I think they're fine, and it's tricky to say how much you invest in them because I think a lot of their value is just clogging things up. And actually having, 6 red surging saves in melee isn't bad. You do kind of get shredded by Pierce, which there is a lot of, but red surging saves maybe actually do have enough staying power to kind of hang with Pierce. Like they have enough. If they had they shouldn't have Impervious. That'd be too much. But yeah, not bad. So give it a 6 out of 10 for competitive. And then theme, I don't really see a clear theme here, but again, nothing inherently wrong with it. So I'll give it a 5 out of 10. Next one, it's a sort of Lando, Ahsoka, Sabine take, which, having looked at this, again, I don't mind. I think it's interesting seeing how many people are doing the double Mandos thing. I'm actually going to be trying this in an upcoming tournament. Quite looking forward to that. But Lando with improv, this is how I'd take him. Ahsoka with burst, reflexes into the fray, offensive, defensive. As I said, only change I would make here is taking either offensive push or strike team lead over offensive, defensive. The rest of it is absolutely fine. Sabine with strike team lead, grappling line, prepared supplies, Darksaber. Again, as I said before, this is pretty much how I would take her. Choice between strike team lead and up close and personal. And then grappling line can also become her combat shield, or you can just drop it all together and save 5 points. But I think aside from this, it's absolutely fine. Rebel vets with extra trooper, heavy and dug in. Personally, I wouldn't bother with the extra trooper. I'd take an Astro or something. Even fixing the ATRTs could be super valuable, so might just be worth doing. Mark 2s with link targeting dug in. I think the Mark II with link targeting is quite interesting because you are banking on getting orders, and you do have things that will be wanting to take orders preferentially. Saying that, you do have Lando who can be guidancing stuff, but he doesn't give orders, which is what link targeting procs off. And I'm trying to think about In terms of command cards, you would bring Ahsoka's 3-pip and probably Sabine's 3-pip. Yeah, you wouldn't bring Lando's 3-pip. And then apart from that, you're running lots of single order 2 and 1 pips. So I don't really see the value in link targeting here. Personally, I'd just drop it. Yeah, Rebels with the SX-21, the troopers and frags. This is a lot to spend on Rebel troopers, and at this point, I'd probably just go for fleets. I do understand the logic of taking a unit that does less damage, but is a bit more survivable with the nimble. The problem is you're only ever, if you want to use this, you're only ever going to be moving once. So then you're trading off charge for 1 dodge, which doesn't sound great. And then you wouldn't have to take the frag grenades, so you could just take the shotgun and the extra trooper for very similar points, and it would give you pierce and a better dice pool, which also works at range 2 rather than just range 1 with the frags. Like, yeah, I just don't think this comp of Rebel Troopers works anymore, which is crazy given that the SX-21 is 13 points for red, red, white, white, which is really good. But yeah, just not the way I'd run my Rebel Troopers personally. And then Mando Resistance, Tenacity is a bold call. If you're planning for them to be in melee, I guess, then that's fine. The rest of it's absolutely fine, exactly what I would take, and same on the Mando Resistance as well. I think Jetpack Rockets on Clan Ren doesn't feel as good because there's only 3 of them, but it's still fine. You know, if you get the opportunity when you're not going to be shooting anything else, turn 1 to deal, let's say, 3 hits through armor, you might convert 2 wounds against most things. Like, that's really valuable and can actually give you some reasonable threat early on. And then, yeah, double ATRTs with laser cannons. I really quite like the spotter uplink here. I think for just 3 points with a unit that doesn't count, I think, as being engaged in melee, it can just go and stand in the middle and give a big bubble of sharpshooter 1. It's not bad at all. And, maybe there's an argument to just run, 3 naked ATRTs with spotter and just run them onto objectives. Shame that you don't get a good weapon to back it up. But, yeah, I don't hate this. I think I do just prefer the layer wicket version, but that's entirely personal preference, not saying it's better or worse than this. Lando's ability to give that 1 step ahead can be really valuable for Force users, especially, or Mando Resistance if they've made a big shot and then want to get behind cover. So, yeah, I quite like this in terms of originality. I think it's reasonably competitive, and I don't hate the theme either. So, yeah, above average scores across the board here. Pure 501st, this is a very straightforward list. Anakin, Burst to Speed, Force Push, into the Fray, Tenacity. Completely understandable. All of these takes make a lot of sense. There is an argument for Saber Throw, just because if you want Tempted to trigger and you're not in melee, Saber Throw can work. So, yeah, not a bad option. Rex with Improv only, so you're giving up that sort of extra scout value, but you're quite tight for points in this list, so I kind of understand it. 2 Clone Infantry with the shotguns, I think this makes sense, and then arcs with medics and into the fray, and then 3 arcs with medics, and then 2 ATRTs with laser cannons. The only change I would really consider making here, and it's a bit of a strange one because I'm then immediately going to argue against it, is dropping the laser cannons on the ATRTs, just because I don't know if you really need them. And it might just be worth trading out one of the ATRTs for a Bark, for instance, just for that extra reach, because I think one of the issues with all infantry lists is that they don't have the ability to project threat across the board in the same way that vehicles with speed essentially have access to. Because it's not necessarily about whether you can kill everything, it's about whether you can kill something and jump onto the objective, or if the rest of your army, because you have a lot of hitting power in this list, can kill stuff, and then your other units can jump onto the objectives. It's why swoops are so good. Like, essentially, the maximum that a normal infantry unit can move is about range 2. Swoops, if they do 3 speed 3 moves, can cover, I think, close to range 5 or range 6. Like, it is crazy distance, and the ability to do that while also getting overrun attacks on the way and all that kind of stuff is just really valuable. So I think even just a Bark with no upgrades or something would just be a really nice thing to have in the back ranks to then jump onto an objective, because yes, they're not insanely tough, but they are probably tough enough to survive if they go late jumping onto an objective. So that would maybe be the only change I'd make here. But the rest of it's absolutely fine. I think originality is fairly low. Like, this is a pretty standard 501st list, but competitive wise it's pretty tough. And yeah, the theme's absolutely fine. Very fitting for a 501st list. And the final list that we're going to be reviewing, in this round at least, is another Empire list, and it's another Empire list with Krennic and Vader. I don't know, like maybe I should be knocking original. I'm actually gonna. I had this at a 6. I'm gonna knock it to a 5 just because it's got Krennic and Vader again. But yeah, so this is basically a lot of stuff that either shoots really far or hits in melee. So Krennic with Binox and Improv, absolutely fine. This is Operative Vader, not Commander Vader, so small props for that, but push and choke. No burst of speed. I suppose he's speed 2 anyway. Yeah, ish. Mission objective, I think you've got to be finding into the fray here, and tenacity is fine. So maybe you just drop mission objective for into the fray. Getting Vader surges is crazy valuable, and I think there's less incentive to infiltrate Vader in this form, but like you haven't got saber throw here either, which is really nice for Vader. Like I think the burst of speed, it's really tricky because it's less valuable on the operative, but it does just give you so many options. And while it's not as necessary on this version, I think it is still something I'd look to include. Callus, strike team lead. Yeah, I mean he's going to be hitting the deaths. Maybe. I don't really. Yeah, I'd just drop the strike team lead and just take improv or something. Then Storms with the DLT and the specialist. Not for me. I think this is too passive. I personally would just drop all of this and just turn them into Ion Snows, because you could take one with Gideon Hask, which then procs off Callus's direct, and then you can just have the Ion weapon on the others. I think that feels better than this does. You would just about have points for Imperial March because those are 29, and the Snows with the Ion and Imperial March would be 30, as in with the upgrade. So you'd probably just have to drop one other thing, but I think you can find some points somewhere. Death with the DT F16. If you're low on points, this is a fine upgrade. It's reasonable value. It's not as good, obviously, as the full heavy, but it's absolutely fine. 2 Scout Troopers with nothing. I don't hate this. Like, I think it's kind of the equivalent of an Ewok Slinger or something in Rebels. Obviously, this has more sort of more survivability. Maybe not. Yeah, similar survivability. But it does have more threat, at least, with their scout and their sort of better dice pool. So they can do a bit of work, but you're going to put them on a flank and then threaten some objectives with a bit of attack range. And then a really budget ATST with the hammers and the light blaster. No mortar is rough. Like, you really want that range 4 sometimes to be able to threaten at long range. And, link targeting isn't a bad call either, although obviously in this list, Vader's going to be getting a lot of attention. And I've given this 5s across the board. I think it's not super original. I think it's fairly competitive, and I think the theme is also fine. Like, I think it's just another pretty standard Empire list, and I think hopefully we won't have too many Krennic Vader lists progressing into the next round, because otherwise it could be quite a few mirror matches going into the final rounds. But there we are. As before, the polls will go up in and around this video, and we will have our we have the matchup set for the quarter-finals. What I'll do is I will kind of switch it to more of a versus style for the quarter-finals. So, Hothcore against Baked Beams, which one's better at theme, which one's more original, which one would kind of win if they played each other, and so on and so on. And then I'll do more polls for those. We'll progress to the semis and on to the final. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Like, subscribe, etc. And I will see you for the next one.